Absalom's rebellion. Now, Absalom had killed his brother. Now, his brother Amnon. Now, this was all part of the punishment that came upon David and his family for what David had done in getting Uriah killed and taking his wife Bathsheba, just as Nathan the prophet had said. But of course, David had to punish Absalom, and he told him to go away, and Absalom ran away and lived in a place called Geshur for 3 years. But King David longed to go to Absalom. He really wanted to get right again with Absalom. Now Joab realized this, and so Joab wanted to bring Absalom back. And what he did, he got a woman from Tekoa, who was a wise woman, and he said to her, act like a mourner and pretend you've been mourning for the dead, and go to the king and say this to him. And Joab put the words in her mouth. Now, when people tell you, oh, go to that man and say this, don't do it. Say what you think and what the truth is, not words that other people have put in your mouth. Well, Joab put words in the mouth of the woman from Tekoa. And she came to the king and said, help me. And the king said, what's your problem? She said, I'm a widow. My husband's dead, and I had 2 sons, and they had a fight. And one of them killed the other one.
Is that true?
No, it wasn't true. She made up this story, or rather Joab made it up. And she said, and now everyone is saying that I must deliver up the brother who killed his brother so that he can be killed as well. Then I'll be left with no children. Now you see, this was set up to make David think about his own situation, that he had had 2 sons, Absalom and Amnon, and Absalom had killed Amnon. And, well, Joab was trying to get to the point that, oh, you should have mercy on Absalom and let him back. In the same way as this woman of Tekoa was coming out with this story to make David feel sorry for her and to see the point that you can't punish a son forever, even if he's killed his brother. And so he says to the woman, go in peace and I'll make sure that everything is all right. And she said, but please let the king remember Yahweh your God, so that the avenger of blood doesn't destroy any more. And she said, can I just say something else? And he said, yes, you can. The woman said, why then have you planned such a thing against the people of God? Because the king himself is guilty in that the king doesn't bring home again the son whom he has banished, that is, he sent away. We must die, and we're as water spilt on the ground, which can't be gathered up again. Neither does God take away life, but God always devises some sort of way so that he who's been banished need not be an outcast from him forever. Now that's, of course, what happened with Adam and Eve. He sent Adam and Eve out of the garden, but God did try to bring them and human beings back to him. So the king said to her, can I ask you something? Is not the hand of Joab in all this? And the woman answered, indeed it is. Your servant Joab put these words in my mouth. But you are wise, like an angel of God, and you know the truth of things on the earth. The king said to Joab, behold, now I have done this thing. So go and bring the young man Absalom back. Joab bowed to the king. So Joab went to Geshur and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. The king said, let him return to his own house, but let him not see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house and didn't see the king's face. Now, in all Israel, there was nobody as beautiful and handsome as Absalom. There was no blemish in his body. Every year he cut his hair, and it was very heavy, 200 shekels.
How heavy would that be?
It would be pretty heavy, really quite heavy, like a sack of apples.
And what was that other word? I can't remember the name of it.
Well, he was handsome, and he was rather vain. You shouldn't be vain if you're handsome. You shouldn't show off your beauty. And beauty, of course, is in the heart, not what's seen in the eyes. So Absalom lived for 2 years without seeing David's face. Then Absalom sent for Joab to send him to the king, but Joab wouldn't come to him. And so he burnt Joab's field of barley, set it on fire. Oh, Joab came to Absalom and said, "Why have your servants set my field on fire?" Absalom answered Joab, "Well, I told you, saying, 'Come here, that I may send you to the king, to say, why have I come from Geshur? I might as well have stayed there still. Let me see the king's face, and if there's sin in me, let him kill me.'" So you see how proud Absalom was. He should have realized he'd done wrong by killing Amnon, his brother, but he says, "Well, if there's anything wrong that I've done, let the king punish me and even kill me." So he'd forgotten about it all. Just like we can do serious sin and forget about it, but God remembers. Just like after David sinned with Bathsheba and got Uriah killed and married Bathsheba, there's the little notice that says, "The thing that David did displeased the Lord." Now, we might think, well, that was a long time ago, but God remembers all our sins, and we need to quickly put them right. Otherwise, we'll end up like Absalom and start forgetting them and thinking, well, I've not really done anything wrong. After this, Absalom prepared a chariot and horses and 50 men to run before him, and he stood beside the gate. And whenever a man came to King David with a complaint or with a judgment that he wanted, Absalom would say to him, "If only I were the king, I would give you justice. I would positively decide what you want. I'd give you what you want if only I were king." And Absalom used to kiss all the men that came past the gate. So he stole the hearts of the men of Israel, and his plan was, of course, to chase David away and to become king.
Kiss on your lips on someone.
Well, it doesn't say. But the idea was that he was trying to get all the men of Israel to think that he was with them. After many years, Absalom said to King David, "Let me go to pay a vow, which I promised to God in Hebron." The king said to him, "Go in peace." So he went to Hebron. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the land of Israel, saying, "As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, 'Absalom is king in Hebron.'" 200 men went with Absalom out of Jerusalem. Absalom sent for Ahithophel, David's advisor, who was actually the grandfather of Bathsheba. And he joined in with Absalom. And more people joined Absalom's rebellion. And the messenger came to David saying, "The hearts of the men of Israel are all for Absalom." David said to his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, "Let's flee, else none of us will escape from Absalom. Quickly, let's get out of here before evil overtakes us." So, poor King David and his family ran away from Jerusalem. The king left 10 women who were concubines, that is, they weren't his proper wives, but he'd had children by them. He left them behind. And the Gittites and the Kerethites and the Pelethites, 600 men who came from Gath, they supported the king and went with him. Now Gath was where Goliath was from, so these would have been Philistines who had repented and joined the people of Israel and were very loyal to David, even when many of the people of Judah turned against him. Ittai went with him, or wanted to go with him, and all the country wept with a loud voice, and the king crossed over the little river Kidron, which was just the little river Jesus crossed over just before he died. And Zadok the priest came, and all the Levites, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they came with him. But the king said to Zadok, "Carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find grace in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me again and show me the ark and his dwelling place. But let God do to me as seems good to him." The king also told Zadok the priest to go back to the city and take his 2 sons with him, Ahimaaz and Jonathan. So Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God again to Jerusalem. David went up by the Mount of Olives, crying as he went up. That's just where Jesus was, just before he died. So you see all these things that are happening to poor David were types. They looked forward to the experience of Jesus. That's why you can see little echoes and shadows of the experiences of Jesus all through the Old Testament. Someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is now on Absalom's side. David said, Yahweh, please turn the advice of Ahithophel into foolishness.
But wasn't Ahithophel once David's chief advisor?
He was, that's right. So this was a great betrayal. Poor David must have felt that one by one all his friends were turning against him. Now, I've had that experience, and we all tend to go through it at some time in our lives, and you realise who are your true friends. But the great thing is that you feel the presence of God. And in the end, God will bring you back. So David advised Hushai the Archite to go back and remain in the city and pretend to be Absalom's friend, so that he would have some spies, as it were, within Absalom's camp. When David was just past the hilltop of the Mount of Olives, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him. This would have been one of the relatives of Saul, and he'd have remembered the grace that David had shown him. And Ziba met him with a couple of donkeys, saddled with 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, summer fruits, and a skin of wine. So, again, you can see how people came out and supported David and how he valued the few good friends that he had. And that's why I say you don't need lots of friends, you need a few good friends. Then Shimei came out, who was a man of the family of Saul, and he should have remembered David's grace. But he didn't, and he threw stones at David and threw dust at him.
Who did?
This man called Shimei, and he said, God is punishing you for what you've done to the house of Saul. God has given the kingdom into the hand of Absalom your son. You are caught by your own sinfulness. Then Abishai said to King David, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go and cut his head off. But David said, no. He curses because maybe Yahweh has said to him, curse David. So David allowed Shimei to curse him, and he tried not to pay attention to it. Absalom and all the people came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. Hushai the Archite, David's friend, whom he'd sent back to Jerusalem to kind of be his spy there, secretly on his side, he met Absalom, and Absalom said, well, why didn't you go with your friend David? Hushai said to Absalom, well, whoever Yahweh and this people have chosen to be king, his will I be, and he will be my master. So you see, that was a vague sort of phrase. He didn't actually say, I think that you are the new king. He said, I will serve whoever is the true king. Now, Ahithophel advised Absalom to take 12,000 men and chase David and kill him straight away. But Hushai said, no, don't do it so quickly. Your father's a very strong soldier. Why don't you just slowly gather a really big army and then be sure of victory? And Absalom said, yes, Hushai's advice is right. So he took Hushai's advice and not Ahithophel's advice, and Ahithophel got so upset that he went and killed himself. Now, of course, what Hushai wanted to do was to have some time so he could send Jonathan and Ahimaaz to warn David of what was happening. So Don't be so proud if your advice isn't taken, even though you're sure that your advice is right, because otherwise you end up like Ahithophel, who went and killed himself because people didn't take his advice. He thought his advice was so right. Well, then there was a great battle between the followers of David and the followers of Absalom. And the battle spread all over a forest. Absalom met some of David's soldiers. Absalom was riding on his mule. That's a kind of a donkey. And the donkey went under the thick boughs of a big oak tree. And his head, you remember he had this long bushy hair, got caught in the boughs and the branches of the oak. And his donkey went away from underneath him and left him hanging by his hair. Somebody told Joab.
Must have been pretty painful.
Yeah. Somebody told Joab, I saw Absalom hanging in an oak tree.
And I'm surprised that his hair didn't fall out.
Yeah, it must have been pretty dramatic. Joab said to the man, why didn't you kill him? And the man said, no, not for 1,000 pieces of silver would I kill the king's son, because David told us all, beware that none of you touch the young man Absalom. Joab said, I'm not going to wait here for you, and he took 3 darts in his hand and thrust them through the heart of Absalom while he was still alive in the oak tree. And they killed Absalom. And then Joab blew the trumpet, and the battle was finished. David was then informed of the death of his son. And he cries and cries. He says, my son, Absalom, my son, Absalom, I wish I had died for you, Absalom, my son, my son. And Joab tells him off and says, you shouldn't have been like that. We all risked our lives for you, and now you're so sad your enemy Absalom, your son, got killed. So David is restored to being king again, and he forgives Shimei, the man who cursed him. But the rest of David's life was full of these kind of rebellions. And the point is that when we sin, as David did in killing Uriah and in the matter with Bathsheba, God will forgive us. But very often the consequence of that sin, the result of it, still remains. And David had to live with the consequence of that sin all his life. And that is a great warning to us. And it just shows that sin is never the way to go. And you may do something in hot blood, thinking that, oh, if only I could get that, and so you go and have it, then you're going to find that, unfortunately, you'll pay the consequences, the price of this, for a very long time.